Michael Crutcher, welcome to My Worst Leadership Moment. How are you, buddy?
I'm very well, Brendan. Great to be with you, and I qualify very well for something called My Worst Moment, so thank you for having me on.
It's actually why you were one of the first people I thought of.
You know me well.
I do, mate. We've known each other for quite a long time, since we little tackers probably hitting a cricket ball together or something like that, I'd say.
It is. It's a long way back, and I value the connection all these decades later.
As I do, mate. Thank you very much. Mate, Michael, how about you tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, work history, and the story leading up to your worst leadership moment?
Yeah, well, I've got my own business now, which I've had for 10 years, which is 55 Comms, which is communication strategy. We work with clients on how they tell their stories and connect with audiences. But before then, I'm a journalist by profession. So I was a sports writer for many years, went into general news. And in general news, I was at the Courier Mail in Brisbane. So I had various roles: chief of staff at the Courier Mail, investigations editor, deputy editor. And then at age 35, I became editor of the paper, which meant I was responsible for the paper's output. All of our journalists, probably we had over 100 at that time, just responsible for making sure that every day we got the newspaper out across Queensland, hit our online audiences and our iPad audiences.
Big responsibilities, mate. And I understand you were the youngest editor, weren't you ever?
Oh, the Courier, yeah, I was young. The paper's been 160 years, so I'm not sure what happened in those early days. I'm sure they had some real pioneers there, but certainly at 35, it was considered young for a metropolitan newspaper. We were the third largest paper in Australia at the time. So, it was a great opportunity and I had great people around me, thankfully.
Yeah, awesome, mate. No doubt a few of those grey hairs like me have come from those experiences, eh?
They came very quickly.
At 35, mate.
Definitely.
How does tell us a bit about your worst leadership moment? And I have a feeling that the Courier Mail has something to play in this.
Yeah, it does, Brendan. And when you asked me about my worst leadership moment, of course, I had so many to choose from, but I thought I would choose this moment because in newspapers, it's a fast-paced environment. I mean, 6 days a week, we would come into the office of the Courier Mail at Bowen Hills and we'd start from scratch. So 6 days a week we'd come in. We could have the greatest paper in the history of the Courier Mail that day, but we had to start from scratch and start the next paper that day. That was a cycle of what we did. We also had the growing online market so we were really starting to hit our online market as well. So it was a busy type of place. You had to make split-second decisions. And a lot of the paper was geared towards the weekend, which were our highest revenue papers, and our Saturday paper in particular was the paper that had the classifieds, when they were still very strong. So looking for jobs, real estate, cars, etc. This was a big paper. We sold about 320,000 papers on a Saturday. And on one particular Saturday, I made just a small error. Our Monday to Friday paper was around about $1.20. Our Saturday paper at the time was $2. And on the Saturday, I just forgot to put $2 on the front of the paper, and we put $1.20 on the front of the paper, which I found out about at 2 a.m. when I got a phone call from our printing press at Murray to say, hey, there's a problem here. You put the wrong price on the paper. So when you have 320,000 papers and you have an 80-cent less mark on your paper, it can cause a few little problems. Now, fortunately, we had the right barcode. So when you scan that paper at the news agency, at the supermarket, it would still have scanned at $2. But what we had right then at 2 a.m. on a Saturday was a live moment where we had made a mistake and that mistake had repercussions.
What did it cost in the end?
It didn't cost as much as you would have thought. And I'll tell you the story of why. What happened was straight away we had to make decisions. So I was enjoying my sleep at the time of about an hour and a half or so, but that was over. What we had to do was decide, what do we do here now? What we had to do was say, okay, the barcode's right. We don't have to worry about that. It's going to scan properly. But some people may see the fact that it says $1.20 on the front page. So what we had to do was quickly get a letter email ready to go around to all of our newsagents, and we had a lot. This is a paper that goes statewide, but we have a distribution network where we can get the messages quickly. What we said to them was, look, this is the situation. This has happened. Now, what you need to know is that if someone sees this and wants to pay $1.20, charge them $1.20. We will reimburse you for the other 80 cents. So we had that set up. So we didn't want anyone to lose any money out of it. And across Queensland, out of the 320,000 people who got that paper that day, $600 worth saw it and thought, I'm going to pay $1.20. So I didn't do the maths. It was fewer than 1,000 people saw it, but it cost us $600 in the end. But that was the financial costs. There was a bit more stress around it than that. And that was probably one of the, just the learnings, trying to do something on the run. We had made a mistake. It was a test for us, but there was more to come on this, because what happened was, at the time, we were having a bit of a spat with Channel 9. They were unhappy about some of our coverage of Channel 9 issues leading up to that. So Channel 9 decided they would do a story on their Saturday night TV news about the fact that the Courier Mail got the cover price wrong on a Saturday. Now, I know you're saying, really, who cares? Which is my reaction. But hey, I'm in media at the time. A story is a story if someone thinks it is. So Channel 9 wanted to come around to my house on Saturday and interview me about this massive error that really passed most of our readers by. So they did do the story as well. I didn't give them an interview, but they did a story as a bit of a square up. So what you sort of had was a situation where that annoyed our journalists. As I said, we had a team of over 100. That really annoyed them. Our readers couldn't have cared less, but what we had all of a sudden was a situation where my journalists wanted to take the matter into their own hands and, get some action, from their viewpoint. So it was a matter of trying to quell that. Now, keep in mind, Saturdays in daily newspapers are sacrosanct days. We didn't have a Sunday paper. That was a separate paper. Saturday is our rest day. We go the other 6 days of the week. So all of a sudden, on our day off, when we're trying to put our feet up and recharge for the week ahead, we had this situation. So it was a bit of a test to try and work that out. But it was our problem to start with. We owned it. We knew it was our problem. We had to try to make amends in the best way we could.
Michael, you spoke a little bit about just the consequences, or I guess that friendly or unfriendly rivalry, so to speak, between Nine and media outlet, the Courier Mail. What was there any other sort of impact or consequence? Did you feel something around your own personal credibility? A bit of an ego hit, I suppose. We've all got a little element of ego in us. Can you share a bit on that?
Especially newspaper editors. It was more frustration from my viewpoint. It was a frustration that we take so much care in what we publish, and when a paper comes out, that paper comes out and everything in it, to the best of our ability, is correct. That's what we pride ourselves on. We never make deliberate mistakes. Mistakes happen, but we try to get it right. But this was such a basic mistake, and I was so frustrated on that. What we did have that night, we had a new Saturday paper coming out the following week in terms of a new design. So I had my best team on that paper doing a dummy run to see what the paper would look like next week. Now, that's no excuse, because the team I had doing the paper was a great team. We had awesome people. What happened was we just missed that price, and we check every element of the paper, but we were sort of checking 2 papers that night, which was just the circumstances. It's not an excuse, it's the circumstances. So for me, it was that frustration. It was the fact that I knew that was going to be an annoying Saturday. I knew that, that could have been avoided. I didn't know that Channel 9 would ring up later that day. That complicated it. But it was a frustration of knowing that was such a small mistake and it would have such potential repercussions. It was a basic thing. It was annoying.
Was social media around in that day?
There was social media around then. So There was a little bit of play on the Saturday fueled by Channel 9. There was a bit of play. I wasn't particularly worried about that because social media sort of sorted itself out, which it tends to do at times. I think social media does have that sort of self-editing function in which people go, oh, really? That's hardly a big mistake. Now, but when your role as a media outlet is to scrutinize and to, give your analysis and call people out for things, well, you're fair game. And we were fair game, even though it wasn't a big deal. We were fair game because that's what we used to do. So, social media was there, but a lot of the commentary on social media was sort of like big deal. There are more important things at play, but it was another thing to factor in to the reaction on the Saturday.
Yeah, that's where my head was going too, mate. I think by nature of the dollars you're talking about, yes, there's some real good learnings from that experience, which you're going to get into very soon. But if that's the news of the day for some people, then, well, there's not a lot in their life, is there?
That's right. And that's what I think you have to compartmentalize, and you've got to work out what is worth worrying about and what is not worth worrying about. And, trying to, compartmentalize that and understand what are the things that we need to address here. I think they're always important, those situations. And, I've got a pretty thick skin and that sort of stuff didn't worry me. We had other things to worry about.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, look, it's those sort of things should not be worth worrying about. What is worth worrying about is how we learn from our mistakes, mate. So what did it teach you? What did you learn from it?
The importance of getting the little things right. And every day in newspapers, but in anyone's role any day, there are little things that just must be done. And they're sometimes really boring things, but they are ultra important, and you know it when you don't get it right. And that's what that sort of taught me, looking back on it, for the frustrations it caused, for the Channel 9 coverage, for whatever damage that did. I doubt it did much at all, but it could have been avoided so easily by us just paying attention to detail. And we sort of got, caught up in, wanting this new design of the paper the next Saturday to really sing and dance. We wanted that paper, that was coming out that day to still be a really good paper with great stories. But in the end, every newspaper, every day, you've got to make sure that the date is right. You've got to make sure the day is right. And you've got to make sure that the cover price is right and the barcode's right. I mean, these are just basic things. We would have had 6 people on our newspaper who normally look for those things. And every one of the 6 of us that night just missed that. And that's that lesson for me. Like in your business, there can be multiple people responsible for little things. And, we're all fortunate to work with really good teams, but it doesn't matter that, about that. Sometimes you just got to go and check and make sure those things are right. And if those things are right, then all the bigger stuff flows beautifully, but don't get sort of too far ahead. Get those basics right to start with.
Yeah, absolutely. I think also one of my takeaways from that experience, what you shared, is that there's a lot of value in having real role clarity and people being responsible for a task or an action item or something like that. That, hey, if there was a person that is their responsibility, as opposed to having 5 or 6 people that could be, they're all sort of looking at it, then at least you can sort of nail that in, and there's probably a greater chance that person's going to make sure they tick that off.
That's right. And for me, in the end, as a newspaper editor, sort of everything is the editor's responsibility in the end. And I looked at that front page, as I did every front page. Even when I had any holidays, I still read the front page every night before it went to press. So for me, that's my responsibility ultimately. And yeah, I had some great people there. They missed it that night, but so did I. And for that reason, I reacted, I guess, in a way where I could have seen that. In the end, I tick off on that. My team was mortified. My team apologized on multiple occasions, and that was great. I really thanked them for it, but it was my responsibility in the end, and I didn't want anyone to feel as though that, that wasn't my responsibility, because it was. I saw it, I had the page, I missed it. So yeah, the role clarity is really important, and all the people who were involved knew that they should have seen it. But in the end, for me, newspapers, the way they run, in the end, that's up to me as well. So it wasn't as though it was something, say, on page, 35, where maybe I don't get to that detail. This was page 1. This was the most important page in the paper. So yeah, that role clarity, that's a great reminder to have that role clarity. And it's something that I'm always trying to look at now. What are we doing? Who's responsible? And how does that team work really well to make sure we get the outcomes we need?
Absolutely, mate. So all these learnings, this story you've shared, and this great example, but the bigger learning experience, how has that shaped your journey since as a leader?
Yeah, it's always, I think about that story a little bit when I think about, it's the end of the day, that's okay. That would have happened. It's okay. I don't have to check it. These are really important things, and I'll still go back and check something. And, it's been done almost all the time, but it's all those little times you may not check. But even when I go back and check things, I might see something else which informs me on something. But just saying, at the end of the day, I still like to, before I sort of log off for the day, go back, double check, are there any emails that I missed today? Any messages I missed? Are there any things I haven't confirmed? I still do that towards the end of the day, because it helps me to switch off then, and I can sort of, switch off for the day and know that, I'm not writing things on my hand at 10 at night because I've forgotten something. So that's still something I try to do, really switch off, but just make sure I've got the day finished, and then I can move on, which is sort of the diligence of being in, say, media, where every day is its own compartment. But I try to do that all the time to make sure that my head's clear.
Yeah, absolutely, mate. And I guess what you're saying is it is those small things that matter. That sort of famous saying, the devil can be in the detail, but that can be good and that can be not so good. So just the ability to make sure that we are making sure we're doing those basics right is a key thing that I take out from the experience you've shared. Mate.
Yeah, definitely. And just little things I've worked with my clients on as well. Like sometimes someone might forget to, put a funding application in by a deadline because it's just assumed it'll happen. I've seen these things happen before. Someone hasn't put their insurance renewal in by the deadline because someone thought it was someone else's job. So even now I see these things and the trouble they can cause. I liken it back to what happened with our cover price, because you can have those little things that people just expect will happen, and the funding application for a significant government funding project was missed. Someone just forgot to hit send on the email and it was cancelled for a year, for 12 months. So just those little things, those little reminders, so much better to be preventative than to deal with the consequences.
Yeah, mate. And in your world, especially in a lot of industries, a lot of worlds, it's those details and the sort of people you're dealing with and the activities you're involved around personal branding and media training and stuff like that. It is those little details that can make all the difference between somebody who's presenting well and somebody who's not quite where they
and also what we have is a situation where people are drawn to deceit and incompetence. People are drawn to it. I've seen it so many times over the years where I've seen stories that are really popular and wonder why those stories are really popular. And often a real contributing factor to it is deceit or incompetence. We're drawn to it because everyone makes mistakes as humans. We all make mistakes. So when other people make what are seemingly basic mistakes, we're drawn to it going, how did that happen? I want to read or learn more about this. So yeah, there are some high stakes around it because as humans, that's the thing that really brings us in.
Yeah, mate. And I think that for me, you've sort of summed up this podcast. We want to learn from people's mistakes. And I feel like listeners and watchers of your episode, when this is published, that they're going to say, how the hell could you make such a basic mistake? You're such a smart dude sitting in this role. But hey, we all make these mistakes, mate. The thing that you need to do, which is popping in my head, is you need to set in place. So when we do eventually leave this earth, maybe on your headstone or something like that, it's like $1.20 or $2, your choice, something like that.
That's right. We'll give you a discount.
Absolutely, mate. Absolutely. You do that one or you do that one. Here's your QR code.
Yeah, that's right.
Mate, look, it's a fantastic story. I really appreciate you sharing. And again, being vulnerable as a leader, sharing those sort of situations, and helping other people say and learn from that experience so that they can relate it to their own industry. And so, it is those little things that count. If we can't get those basics right, then it can lead to some other challenges down the road. Thankfully, yours was more than recoverable. You've gone on, and I know you've got a fantastic business in place. You're working with some great people and doing some great things, mate. So I want to thank you again for being a fantastic guest on My Worst Leadership Moment.
Thanks for the invitation, Brendan. And I had 1,000 more stories as well. So thank you.
There will be more series, and you will be welcome.
Look forward to it.